Welcome to Seven Skills for the Future podcast. My name is Emma Sue Prince, and this podcast is based on the internationally selling book by the same name. This book focuses on 7 important skills. They are adaptability, critical thinking, empathy, integrity, being proactive, being optimistic, and being resilient. And this podcast is all about how you can bring these skills into your everyday life so that you are living a life full of happiness, full of purpose, great relationships, doing work that you love, and just really getting the most out of life. Welcome to 7 Skills for the Future podcast. My name is Emma Sue Prince and I am your host. And today I'm interviewing Jason Rosoff, who is the CEO of Radical Candor based in California, USA. And Radical Candor is an organization that specializes in developing leadership. They're very successful. They do a lot of different things, but like many businesses, they've been severely affected by COVID-19. And we talk a lot in this episode about the crucial importance of resilience, and that's a skill that is really coming to the front right now within adversity. And Jason also talks about the meaning of the word catastrophe, which is all about it means to turn over, to reveal. And so he says some interesting things about how businesses and leaders are responding, and how they've had to adjust and adapt what they are doing. So they've had to really take a step back from their current work, which is live, face-to-face executive training. Sounds kind of familiar to me, actually. But so, looking that actually that's not something they can do right now, but they are talking to their clients about what they need and where can they support and where can they help. What I love about this interview is how Jason talks about leadership and how, what will emerge from this is which leaders are able to really lead their organizations through this crisis. So I hope you enjoy this bonus episode. Again, it wasn't a planned interview. Originally, I thought we'd be talking mainly about leadership. And then when we did the interview, with this on our minds all the time, we just wanted to talk about what is happening right now. And I hope you find some interesting nuggets here for yourself to take forward and that you really enjoy this special episode. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to 7 Skills for the Future podcast. It's lovely to have you with us today. And I'm joined on this episode by Jason Rosoff, who is the CEO of Radical Candor and is joining us all the way from California. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here and excited to share some ideas about how we can work together in this moment to show up better for one another.
Fantastic to have you on the show. And I want to start by talking about, in times of crisis and uncertainty, what does that mean for our businesses? No matter what we might be doing, no matter what our work is, how do we use this time to perhaps, in some cases, maybe reinvent our business, or perhaps to just get that message out more strongly?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's something that we've been thinking about quite a lot here at Radical Candor. For the folks in your audience who may or may not be familiar, Radical Candor is a pretty simple idea. It's the idea that if we want to get the most out of our work and build the strongest relationships, we need to be willing to show real, genuine care and respect for one another, at the same time that we challenge each other to do better, to do better work. And I think in times of crisis, that comes into even starker relief, the importance of both of those things. And I'd like to maybe start the conversation by sharing some stories. I think when I think about this, it really comes into focus when I start to talk to people about their experience. And so I have a friend who works in healthcare and has received really confusing communication from their leaders about about when and whether they can work from home. They're a therapist. When and whether they can work from home. Can they offer phone sessions? Will they have access to personal protective equipment? And what it made me realize was that in times of crisis, clarity, right, the sort of challenge directly piece, it can actually be an act of kindness. The lack of clarity was so unsettling, so upsetting. It was creating an immense amount of stress. And it was being translated as a lack of care, right? Interestingly, it had the sort of double effect of not being clear and coming across as very unkind. And that experience, it really makes me think quite a lot about our approach to communication in this moment and how that is essential for allowing us to sort of stabilize our relationships and our businesses. I think it's the moment we find ourselves in is unprecedented in terms of the degree of uncertainty that we face. And my perspective is that the best leaders in this moment are being very clear with their teams about what they see and what they what they know and what they don't know. And they're also making time, very importantly, they're making time for the human aspect of dealing with crisis, which is different people are going to have different levels of concern. And it's not going to be a one size fits all. You're not going to be able to say, oh, we're going to have, one virtual check-in a week, and that's going to be enough sort of human connection for people, or that's going to give people enough opportunity to check in with one another, or that's going to help me know as a leader how my team is adapting or reacting to this moment of uncertainty. We really do need to be making time and space. And so those two things, like space for humanity and clarity in communication, not only about what you know, but about what you don't know, to me seem like the essential elements that are required for any business to pivot out of what is undoubtedly a huge disruption.
Yes. And do you have examples of any organizations that are doing that particularly well right now?
That's a great question. I don't know. The situation is so new. What I do know is what we're doing. So I can share a little bit about our experience with this so far. So for the last 2 years, our primary source of revenue at Radical Candor has been live in-person executive training events.
Yes. Okay.
As you can imagine, that is not those events are not happening right now. And so a couple of things have been on our minds. First of all, I think one of the first steps we took was to take a step back and say, like, what is actually happening for our customers and clients right now? They're going through the same things that we are, which means we've spent the last 2 weeks on this like roller coaster where it's sort of unclear what physical movement will be allowed, let alone like what work we can get done. And so we're very conscious of the fact that this idea of training or of like skilling people in the very short term, like that's not what's on people's minds, right? They're just trying to figure out, like, is my business going to survive? Are the people going to be okay? And so just being really conscious of that, we said, we're going to take a step back from selling, even though that feels really risky, even though we see our inquiries basically dropping by 80%. We're going to take a step back from selling and see if we can find a way to be of service in this moment. Is there a way for us to be of service to people? And we have found some ways. So we started offering some free webinars where we've been not just talking at people, but encouraging conversation between our clients and our broader audience. We have done some very intentional outreach to clients just to see how they're doing, right? Just to check in at on a human level, and see how people are doing. And luckily, we had started over the last year to build out a set of virtual offerings. So in addition to virtual workshops, we actually partnered with the Second City, who's an improv comedy group based out of Chicago, to build some really cool digital content that we call Improvising Radical Candor. And it's a really cool sort of Netflix style comedy series that educates and entertains simultaneously. And so we have these tools that we built, these assets that are more valuable in this moment. And we're starting to move in the direction of figuring out not only adapting our existing work to a virtual environment, which we had done a fair amount of over the last year, but also figuring out how to make this digital content that we created better suited for this moment when people find themselves sort of dislocated from their norms. And I think our guiding question has been pretty clear, which is, how can we support our customers in this moment, even if it's very different from what we've done before? That's the question that we keep asking ourselves. And it's yielding really interesting results, and we're getting really positive feedback.
No, that's a really that's really, really great to have that as an overarching kind of question, because I think for you and for me, for my business as well, and probably for lots of other businesses, I think the initial thing is, oh my gosh, we can't do what we were doing anymore. And how do we change that? But when you turn it round and think, actually, the guiding question is, how do we help our clients and customers? How do we give them something that they really need and support them? Then it changes what you then decide to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that I saw it do was it helped to turn some of the sort of like panicky feelings that the team was having into feelings of optimism, right? Because there are answers, and it is exciting to think of new ways that you could support. And it is uncertain. It doesn't erase the uncertainty, but I think in some ways, this is probably true of your team, but like our team is in this, like we're missionaries, right? We're not mercenaries. We are on we're on a quest to help people improve their relationships and get better work done together. Like that's why we're together. And I think in that world, the thing that feels worst is when you feel like this ability you have to help, you have no outlet for it. There's no place to put it. And I think that feels far more panic inducing.
Yes. Yeah, because what you're talking about there is really the true essence of being proactive, because you're placing your energy into the things that the only thing that you can control, which is basically what you do next. And taking it away from, oh my gosh, what is going on and what is going on around us. So I think the minute that you do that, you do feel better in that moment, because you're focusing on something that you actually have control over, when everything around you, feels like out of control.
Yeah. And I think, like, interestingly, it is, things are quite out of control. I think that it's one of those moments where I so resonate with what you just said. Like the path to sort of like mental well-being is to focus on the things that you can control. And I think we're so used to things being so good that normally it's a feeling, it's a misperception that we have that things are out of control. And it's helpful even in those moments to focus on the things that you can control. And this is a great example of a moment where things are like totally out of our control. Like it's not a feeling. It's like it is reality. And I think it was so interesting to me to see how useful it was that mindset shift towards proactivity was even when there is so much that's out of our control. Because I look around, and to your point about companies that are doing this well, I look around at organizations that are doing a better job of this. And what I see is like, I see people in sometimes in big ways, but mostly in small ways, like stepping up and trying to help each other, like making an effort. I think especially in this moment where resources might seem scarce, right? I don't know if you have the same, like you've probably, I think it's sort of made the national news, but like this, like people buying too much toilet paper
Oh
is
yes,
happening in
yes.
like countries
Yeah,
around the world.
yeah, yeah.
Which is like, which on the surface is like, I don't like, why is that happening? But it's actually the same reaction, right? It's people feeling like things are out of control and trying to find something that they do control.
It actually comes from something that's quite primeval, because when exactly what you've just been saying, when we feel out of control, or it's kind of like survival, we will automatically go for something that's really big in size. So big, huge packs of toilet
Uh-huh.
paper, and taking them off the shelves
Yeah.
and buying them is actually that, because everyone's like, why toilet paper? But the reason is because it's big. It's a big pack that you can,
Yeah.
take and put in your car, and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm gathering something that's going to help me. But yeah,
I,
it is.
yeah.
You're absolutely right. It's trying to be proactive, but it's coming from a place of panic rather than a place of control.
Yeah. And I think like there's a, um, a common sort of theme in consulting, especially in coaching, where you're trying to determine, am I acting out of fear or am I acting out of love, right?
Mm.
Uh, because I think the moment, like the challenges that we have right now is that when we react out of fear, when we react from a sense of scarcity, I think it causes, it perverts our thinking, because for example, there aren't food shortages and there is no toilet paper shortage. There's no reason to be hoarding toilet paper or hoarding food, at least at this moment. And what you realize is just like how damaging it actually is, because when the impact of that is that for people who might be more vulnerable or less capable of getting to the grocery store frequently, it is actually likely the case that that behavior is having a much more detrimental effect on those people
Yeah.
who have the least capability of controlling their circumstances. And that's nobody's intention, but it's sort of a lesson to me in this moment about how to think about our businesses as well. Because like, if we act out of fear and purely out of a sense of self-preservation, without a sense of how those actions are going to impact our team, our clients, our community more broadly, I think we will see, we will miss opportunities, right? We will miss, we will miss not just like opportunities to do new things, but we'll miss ways to do really basic things that will be helpful to us in the long run, like connect as humans with our clients. So I think about that quite a lot, and when and my team is very much on board. And so like I said, missionaries, not mercenaries is really helpful because everybody feels super aligned
Yes.
around this idea of like, let's try to act from a place of love. And I realize like not everybody's in the same place. Not every person feels the same way about their work. And that
Yeah.
makes the job of leadership especially hard, because I think we need to speak to the fears and concerns that people have and not be judgmental about them, right? Like just because someone is reacting out of fear and self-preservation doesn't mean we judge them. It just means like we need to have a conversation with them about the impact of those actions.
Do you think there will be, I mean, undoubtedly there are going to be businesses that and leaders that don't do this well, that don't have those resources inside themselves to lead in that way. So what do you think? This is just a kind of pondering question, really. What do you think we might start to see, in a few weeks' time, and in a few months' time?
The Greek root, the word catastrophe, means to turn over, and I think that another way to think of it is sort of like to reveal. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been thinking about that a lot because what I'm recognizing is that it's not just that we don't have. There are two sort of like, or maybe there are probably many more classifications, but leaders who are not doing this well in this moment, some of them don't have the resources. Like they want to do it, but they can't because they're concerned for their family or their personal health or whatever else is going on. And it's just the energy to do this, to like be present for their teams and to lead from a place of care is just, it's too hard. But I actually think
Mm-hmm.
that there's like another group who don't think this is important, who are lashing out at team members who don't
Mm-hmm.
want, who don't see it as like their responsibility to sort of like pick themselves up by their bootstraps and come to work. Like they don't feel personally scared, and so they're judgmental of people who do. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's going to be very hard to walk that back. In a time when times are good, I think, generally speaking, it's a bit more forgivable. Like we can see it as, this isn't the way that I think about the world. Like the way my boss is sort of encouraging people to come to work sick, for example, which is a thing that is really happening.
Mm-hmm.
That really happens, especially to service workers.
Yes.
Right? I don't care what's going on in your life. You need to show up for work. Uh, but like now it's really life for death, right? Like, and
Yeah.
the behavior isn't changing. So I think in those cases, we're going to see businesses who who are not categorically different, right? Same business like restaurants and stuff, um,
Mm-hmm.
where people are going to be talking to each other, right? Like if the business with a manager who's sort of like lashing out at their employees survives, which it may not, um, if it survives, like people will have long memories for how they're treated in this moment, and they will talk to other
Yes.
people about how they've been treated.
Yes.
Uh, and
Yes.
so like I don't think there's less of a shield, um, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that leaders are going to be able to
Yeah.
hide behind, uh,
Mm-hmm.
than maybe they
Mm-hmm.
have previously. Because I think,
Yeah.
taking my friend who works in healthcare as an example, the message that they've gotten is, you don't matter. We don't care very much about your well-being, which seems like a completely bonkers message for
Mm,
for healthcare.
mm, mm,
Um,
mm, mm.
and that's going to affect their relationship with that employer forever. Like it's
Yeah,
not going to be the case that they're going, like, things are going to go back to normal and they're going to forget that, which means that when times get tough in the future and they feel like, hey, I could go someplace else and I feel like I would be better cared for as a human being, that's going to be an important factor in a decision about whether or not to stay
yeah,
employed. And from a turnover
yeah,
perspective, like, you have the initial problem of that we're going to experience because of the economic disruption of layoffs, et cetera. Um,
yeah,
but like once people are back to work and the economy starts to recover, I think we're going to see a pretty massive shift. Like I think we're and it's going
mm,
to take 18 to 24 months for us to see the effects of this, but we're going to start to see turnover in those
mm,
organizations that handled this poorly. And that kind of brain drain, I think, the sort of like institutional knowledge drain that happens as a result of that is going to be incredibly
mm.
costly. So even if businesses survive, my guess is like we're going to start to see we'll see the long-term effects of this, for years,
Yeah,
in terms of like
yeah,
how well people are able to retain folks.
yeah, yeah. No, it's really interesting. And I really like what you said about catastrophe, being about, revealing, because as you say, this kind of behavior will be much more visible and much more impactful. And you know, as you say, when times are good, we kind of know this is going on, but actually it's gonna really come out now in a different way, and people will make decisions based on how they've been treated during this time. So you guys could have your work cut out for you, really, with helping companies, helping leaders tap into their empathetic skills, I suppose.
The good news is, like, a lot of people are feeling called, right? They understand the power and importance of empathy and connection in this moment. I'm seeing more good stories than I am seeing bad stories, which is so encouraging to me. And this is not just like, it's not necessarily entire companies who are doing this, but what I'm seeing is I'm seeing individuals, like individual leaders and team members stepping up and doing more for one another. You know, in our extended community of coaches and facilitators, we have people getting together to share leads, people getting together. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're seeing a kind of caring collaboration and cooperation that I think is the sort of like essence of what is good about human community. And so I think we're also strengthening those skills. Like, this is a moment where we need to rely on them maybe even more than we have, especially because times have been relatively good for so long. For many people, that we're flexing those muscles a little bit. And I think we're going to come out of this moment. Many people, many teams are going to come out of this moment much stronger than when they went in. And that doesn't mean they won't be disrupted, and that doesn't mean there couldn't still be failures. But I think when I think about my most important lifelong business and personal relationships, like, almost all of them were formed in some kind of a crucible, right? Like, heat and pressure help to form those bonds more strongly. And so I think for a lot of people, there is a real gift in this moment. It's incredibly hard and incredibly sad, a huge social and economic disruption. But there are some gifts. There is certainly real beauty that I see in the way people are reacting to this moment and supporting one another.
Jason, I want to thank you so much for making the time to come on the show today. If our listeners want to find out more about Radical Candor and what you do, how can they find that information? How can they find you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, you can come visit us at radicalcandor.com for if you want to find out about Radical Candor, the sort of like company and what we do. And I did mention also that we have this partnership with the Second City that we've created this digital comedy series, and that would be at improvisingradicalcandor.com.
Fantastic. I'm really interested in that. Is that something anybody can access, the improvising?
Good question. So right now it is like a B2B type of product. And so you'd have to sign up for a demo to get access to it. But we are working on some ways over the next weeks and months to make it more readily available to individuals who might be interested. So stay tuned.
Great. That sounds really good. So we'll make sure that those links are in the show notes. And thank you again so much, Jason, for coming on the show.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the 7 Skills for the Future podcast. There are all sorts of things you can do to boost each of the 7 skills. If you want more ideas, you can buy the book, 7 Skills for the Future. You can also go online to our website, Unimentor, and join as a member, and you'll be able to access more resources, ideas, and free downloads. If you have a question you want to ask on these podcasts, get in touch through Instagram at 7 Skills for the Future, or on Twitter and Facebook at Unimentor. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your podcast player of choice.